as Colin said, I'm Rebecca Howard and I'm a speech and language therapist. I've met you guys quite a few times before over the years, and generally I'm talking about feeding, but I'm also going to talk about speech, language and communication today, which is why I'm now going to go super fast through all those things. What I want to do first was just a little bit of a plea for some help. Just very quickly, I'm part of a study where we're looking at, I don't know what happens to you guys when you're talking about you're going to your specialist centre, which may be quite a long way from home, so you're going with your child, with your baby, with your young adult. You get there for a feeding assessment, say, and your child's asleep, or they're not hungry, they've had something to eat in the car, so they don't feed when they come to see someone like me. So it's all very stressful. What actually ends up happening is people tend to show me a video on the phone about how their child feeds. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Haven't got a problem with that, but let's look into how I do that properly. Okay, there's nothing wrong with your video, but it's how do I and other speech therapists like me do that properly. Okay, so we are doing some studies into how reliable using these videos is, with a view to that you don't have to make all these long journeys as much in the future. So just a little bit of a plea for anyone who may feel they want to help us. We're after data, basically. We're after children, it is the younger age group, so I'll show you that at the end. So children who have any degree of feeding difficulties, mild, moderate, severe. All we're asking people to do is upload. So you'd have to say it's for 3 months. So month 1, month 2, month 3, you have to upload a short video of about 2 minutes into the app which we'd provide you and answer a short questionnaire. So month 1, 2 and 3. So at the beginning, you see here, you have to do a swallowing quality of life questionnaire. You just do that once, and then every month going forward, you do video recording and a parental questionnaire. The parental questionnaire is 10 questions, literally just drop downs really quick. I think just once you sign up to, if you want to sign up, then they'll give you some guidance about how the best way is to do the video. Like I say, it's about 2 minutes. If it's children 5 months to 7 years, I don't know if any of your children fall into that category, but we'd be really grateful if anybody felt they had the energy, really, I suppose, amongst everything else you're doing, to help us. It really would help us going forward for families and limiting the amount of travelling people are doing for sometimes what can be quite a short visit, or you end up showing us things on the phone anyway. So that's my first little plea. So that one's done. That's the mouse. So I will now move on to talk about feeding, speech, language and communication. So, like I say, I've tried to split it into feeding, into speech, into language and then into communication. So that is me, I think, it's coming on slowly. It's going to bring my email address up. I'm quite happy for people to email me going forward with any questions. I'm going to be around over lunchtime, so I'm also happy to people to speak to me while I'm eating. I can eat and talk, that is not a problem. So feeding, I think what I try to do is, I don't know, obviously, your children's ages, their stages, their difficulties. I've tried to summarise what I think maybe the difficulties you've had through the years and talk about what challenges there have been and what maybe we can do as therapists to help you. So I imagine that for all of you, feeding was probably difficult from the outset. So from birth, maybe your child had a lower muscle tone. So that probably means their feeding reflexes, which is mainly suck and swallow at that stage, was probably present, but just less efficient. So you might have struggled to get volumes of feeds in. You may have gone down the road of needing supplementary feeds, which was the lovely nasogastric tubes. You may have moved on to gastrostomies. reflux disease may have become a feature in your life, may still be a feature in your life, and the after effects and the ongoing effects of reflux disease. And we can happy to talk about that. It's unlikely but not impossible that your child maybe had really severe swallowing problems. I'm talking about safety of swallow. It's not impossible, and maybe they might have had difficulties with fluids and not other things. It may have been suggested over the years that you use thickener. Has anybody had the lovely experience of using thickening fluids? Are you still using them? Well done. I think thickener back in the day it would have been lovely if it had been a solution to a lot of problems, but it solved one problem, but actually does create some other problems as well. So in the UK, we are getting better now. So I'll put a link here to our Royal College's position statement, which came out a couple of months ago. If you were from other countries, say the States, you may be a little bit ahead of us on this respect. So the position in the UK is that whilst we know that thickened fluids may be swallowed more safely in some children, what we don't know, or have the evidence to know, is whether that means that protects their chest. Okay, we don't know that. But we do know that thickened fluids may mean that children drink less fluid. They may find it more difficult to drink the fluid. We know they have efficiency problems with sucking, so we're just maybe making it a bit harder for them. The thickeners may make them a bit constipated. So I think, is anybody still on thickener? Or is anybody using thickener? No. All I'd say is if you do come across any other families who are using thickener, I think just encourage them to have a conversation as to why they are using it. Because the position in this country now is you need to have more robust evidence to support why you're using it, and is it worth, it's called the burden of care, so is it worth the burden of care in terms of reduced intake, constipation, etc. So please get that message out there. Weaning may have been difficult. You may have got through the first stage of the sloppy foods quite easily, but lumps became a no-no. Gagging became a part of your life. It was, having to be prepared to clean up sick with the drop of a hat. So it may be still difficult. Lumps may be still a challenge for your children. They may do things like this baby-led weaning, which is basically letting the child pinch food off the plate next to them, choose how and what they want to eat. So baby-led weaning or finger feeding, so your child feeding themselves, may be more successful. You may get some progress with those areas, but it may not be nutritionally complete. So you may have the child who is picking at lots of things, eating, chewing, swallowing bits of it falling out the mouth, but which is great from my point of view, but from a nutrition and a dietetic point of view, means they may not have a complete diet orally from that. So you may still be in the position where you're either relying on milk feeds for longer than the textbooks say, or you are still stuck between a tube and oral feeds. And you may be stuck on a tube not because of swallowing problems. You may be stuck on a tube for lots of other difficulties, which we'll talk about. So, if we are in this middle ground of our child, we know our child can swallow, they can chew certain foods, they can swallow foods, they can swallow fluids, but we are reliant on some degree of tube feeding. We're now moving to the realm of more psychology of feeding, so there's two schools of thought really. There's Marcus Wilkin, who does a lot of the fast tube weaning, so he would say a hungry mouth learns the necessary skills very quickly. So basically you withdraw calories from the tube and the child will then replace those orally. Well, yeah, I'm sure some children do. We'll talk about why some children do and some children don't. And then Dr. Terence Dovey, who's actually a psychologist with a lot of experience in feeding disorders. He's based at Brunel University. If anyone wants his contact details, I can grab them for you. So he would say, if you work on oral skills and reversing oral aversion before hunger is provoked, that's a better way to go, which probably sits better with me. I think it sits better with the group of children we have here, that we need to work on oral skills, so getting skills to manage fluids and solids, and the oral aversion that we've probably got a lot of, I would imagine, and then provoke hunger. So it's a two-pronged approach. We're not just making the child hungry and then assuming they will start eating orally. It would be easy if that was the case, but probably isn't the case, I suspect. So how do we go about doing this? Has anybody heard of the SOS approach or has a therapist who is trained in using that approach with them? It's not a new thing, it's been around in the States for a while. It's usually a speech therapist or an occupational therapist who is trained in this area. So I've just put on there, they've just brought out a white paper this year, so you can go on the website and have a look at it. So SOS just stands for Sequential Oral Sensorimotor Programme. It's basically looking at exposing the child to different textures of food types in the hope that they will gradually accept those, and we might be starting as accepting being at the table with that food type, moving towards them chewing and then swallowing that food type. Okay, so it can be a long process, but that's not, to me, you shouldn't be somewhere along that process. So, for example, their approach is engaging the child in play with a purpose to support skill development, choosing foods to help a child learn the skill needed to eat, a varied and nutritious diet. So all these things are really, really valued and really good aims that they have. So you can, on the website, you can search for any professionals who are trained in SOS, because you go on the training course and then you have to register as a certified therapist. So you could look in your local area to see if there are any locally trained therapists. So I would encourage you to do that. If you feel you fall into that category where you need that probably medium to long-term support regarding progressing your child, either through textures or through weaning off a tube to oral, or even just more oral and less tube, even if it's not off the tube completely. Okay, so have a look at their website and see if you've got a local therapist. There are more of them out there now. Also, they have some really good information. Sometimes it's stuff that you've already known, you've worked out, but having a name for it means that maybe you can explain things more easily to other people, because I guess that when you have a child with a feeding difficulty, everybody's got an opinion, haven't they? Everybody in the family has an opinion, and why haven't you tried this? Have you tried that? Oh, I think you should do this. And you've probably done all those things hundreds of times, so even if it's just a point, helpful, I was going to say grandmas, I don't know why I thought of grandmas. Helpful grandmas in the direction. Have we got some helpful grandmas? To say, yes, I value your opinion and your comments, but please can we look at this parent information which explains why my child is behaving in such a way. Okay, so there's some really good resources out there. Tube-weaning, which is the biggie, isn't it? Have we children tube-fed? Yeah, tube-fed. Anybody, is it a combination or fully? Fully, because of aversion? Yeah, okay, which is what I guessed you'd be. So, from my point of view as a speech therapist, as if a child that was on my caseload had a nasogastric tube or a gastrostomy tube placed, I wouldn't see that as, oh, okay, great, I can sit back and put my feet up. To me, now, my next aim is, can I wean them down from that? I mean, weaning them down or weaning them off. So we're just trying to work out what's realistic for that child. So I don't ever think, well, yeah, we've got the GT tube in and that's it, we can all sit and relax. Now, we are looking at weaning from that to whatever degree is appropriate for that child. So either from nasogastric to oral or gastrostomy to oral. So there's a fast versus slow weans, which the slow weans are called like the chipping away weans. It's a bit, 1 month you make a bit of progress, then something happens, the child gets ill, you go on holiday and your routine's all messed up and you're back to square one, so you start away. And it might be when you look back over 6 months and a year, you can reflect and think, okay, we have moved on a couple of steps, but that's okay. There's no upper age limit either on weaning off a tube. I have heard some parents come to me and say that a helpful professional has said if your child isn't fully orally fed by 2 years, then they will never orally feed. There is no evidence anywhere to support that. Yes, as a child gets older and they are reliant on tube feeds, it's more difficult, but it's not impossible, and it's certainly not something you should be striving to have some aims in, whether they're small, medium or long-term aims. So there's no age cut-off point. So I mentioned again here, I put a paper here from Terence Dovey, who's the guy that I mentioned before. He has done a lot of work in this sort of work. So sort of a new thing, I suppose, in the last couple of years is ARFID, which is the Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. It's become a recognised diagnostic label just in the last few years. So it is the children who do not feed orally, not because they can't physically feed, and it's not because they have a body image reason for not feeding. So it's not the dysphagic, so the non-swallowers, it's not the bulimic, anorexic children. There was always this group of children, which is your children and lots of other children, who are the other category, who they don't feed, and we know they can, but they don't. But it's not because, obviously, they are worried about body image or other anxieties. So these children have now fallen into the category of ARFID. There's a lot of children in this category. It does include children, for example, whose primary diagnosis is autistic spectrum. Okay, but you can find a lot of information now if you look up some of the research around ARFID and approaches to working with children who have ARFID. Okay, so your children will have features of that, and whether they would come under the true classification. But it's worth looking into, so look into ARFID. So. But I think, I suppose what's saying tube weaning is hold it there as a hope, why not? Why not? It might be your hope is that we reduce your tube by 10% or 20% or 30%. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't have those hopes there. Okay. So I'm happy to talk more about some of these things. I'm conscious of whizzing through everything really fast. So I'm moving on to speech production. Okay, I'm imagining we've been through referrals to speech therapy for speech problems, articulation problems, speech being difficult to understand. I remember going back in the years with Helena doing all that work. I guess what to say in regards to what people imagine traditional speech articulation therapy to be is there's no consensus in the UK about how many hours of therapy, so face-to-face therapy, so direct therapy. There's no consensus about how many sessions, how many hours a child should receive. There was a government meeting with interested parties for most of last week, looking at childhood apraxia of speech. They are looking at developing some guidance in that small area. So there will be some guidance that comes out with regards to hours and the fact that it is better for a child who has a speech articulation. So that's they have difficulty forming certain sounds. It's potentially better for that child to have therapy with a speech therapist rather than given a programme for another person to do. So I've just put in here some of it's a bit blurry, but this is just a little bit of consensus information that came from Australia about how they are treating a whole range of children who have speech articulation disorders. So if you look at the second one down, which says the therapy segment, which is what they're calling it, says 2 to 4 sessions is your goal, so an average of 3 sessions. So a session is obviously your face-to-face with a speech therapist, but that is for each individual sound. So, for example, if your child was struggling to say t, you would do that therapy segment for t. You would then achieve that, generalise it, and then you'd move on to the next sound. Okay, so it's very much aimed at children who have difficulties with a small number of sounds. I'm guessing your children have got quite a concoction of variations that they use for sounds. But it's coming, so it gives you, as a parent, some evidence and some power to support going forward with getting some direct services for your children. What I do also want to talk about under the heading of communication language is just some recent developments that have come in the last few years. We're quite lucky in speech therapy in that Google have been really good. Google have been really good in looking at developing apps and services for they've looked at it aiming it at adults, but obviously some of these things you can take from and apply to children. They actually have also employed a speech and language therapist from the UK as part of their development team, who's a very sensible guy. So what is being developed, he is trying to tailor it towards people who we know have speech and communication difficulties. So I'm going to go through some of the new things. Like I said, I don't know what abilities, what strengths your children have. So some of them you could write off straight away. Some of them we could tweak, and I'm happy to talk about how they can be tweaked. Some of them you think, oh, actually, yeah, I might try that, I might use it. So the first one, which is most new, is this Project Relate. So that's the what you'll see if you went into Google Play. They're not available on Apple. You know how Apple like to protect their things. So these are all available just on Android devices, but they're all free actually. So this is Project Relate. They've spent 2 years, more than 2 years, collecting, they call it non-standard speech. So what they've done in America is they collected non-standard speech. That was young adults with speech difficulties. They've got them to record millions and millions of phrases into their computer, and some clever person or some algorithm has now developed an app. So the idea is, you download the app, the patient, the child, the adult, has to record 500 short phrases. Okay? So, first problem is, the phrases, you read out a phrase into your phone. Okay? But I was thinking, and how I've done it with some people is, I've said the phrase and they've repeated. So if you've got a child who's pretty good at repeating things back, it doesn't matter how they're saying it, that's not the aim. The aim is for the app to learn their speech. Okay, so you get them to repeat what you're saying, or they read it if they're able. It's 500, but you don't have to do it all at once. It saves as you go along. So please don't feel you need to do it all at once. And then, I'm just going to... You would end up with somebody. So this is a patient of mine using the Project Relate. So you just use it off your smartphone. So the patient's lady's talking. So as you can see on here, so it says, Anna is waiting for her results. She hopes to do sociology at Newcastle, and Joey's wish with the PCC results. Well, the second bit of it doesn't make sense, does it? Okay. So the second bit of it was actually George is waiting for his GCSE results. But I knew, so nothing's ever going to be perfect. This is her first time using it, so it will get better as the more she uses it. But I knew, because I sort of knew a bit about what was going on, what it meant. So it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, so when she was speaking it, it was quite unclear, unless you knew that person. But the first bit of it has come out quite clearly on the app. Okay, so that's an option for people. Another one which I think is really good is this action blocks. Again, it's part of Google Assistant. What you can do on action blocks is if you go into the app, you can choose what you want it to do. So you could get it to, for example, I've got one now that I've just put on someone's tablet because they got fed up with people not waiting for them to get their speech organised, and talking for them. So we've just put an action block onto their home screen of the tablet with a big hand like that. When they touch it, it says something like, "Oi, wait for me," or "Hey, I'm trying to speak." Okay, it's just a quick one touch, and then it says it. You can use symbols. So if you've used picture communication symbols on other communication devices, it's linked to all those symbols. So you can use it with a symbol, you can use it with a real picture, photograph uploaded from your phone photo gallery. It's a really good one, actually. And I was thinking you could even just get a cheap tablet, as big as you can, and you can make the action blocks as big or as little as you want, depending on what your child can manage. So you could have their home screen of their tablet just devoted to action blocks, and it becomes, in effect, like a sort of dynamic communication board for them, rather than the paper-based ones that you might have had in the past. You can put an action block and link it to phoning someone. So the action block could be, in an emergency, phone grandma. And they just need to press that button and they phone you. Maybe don't teach them that. Yeah. Just press the button and they go directly into phoning grandma. You could put an action block to a map for directions. So it's actually, that's the most useful one, I think, across all different people that I've worked with. There's this one here, which is called Activate. So this is what it looks like when you search it. It is used for people who have really no recognisable speech, but can learn. So what you can do is you can link a facial expression to a spoken phrase in the app. It's most useful, or primarily useful, for people who don't know the person. So you, as parents, well, you know if your child makes a certain facial expression, you know that means they're uncomfortable, they're tired, they want to go out, etc. Whereas if they were in a new situation with new people and you're not there to interpret, this may be something you could use. So this example I've got here is raise eyebrows, which means wait. Smile means please come here. So it looks at your face, you make the facial expression, and then you link it to whatever phrase you want that to be linked to. Again, useful for people who don't know your child. Next thing I was going to talk about is an app called Speak Unique. This is actually a voice banking service. So voice banking is something we use for patients primarily who have diseases like motor neuron disease, where we know they're going to lose their speech. So while they still have speech, we would bank their voice for use later in a communication device. But what it's really good at is once you've registered on the website, you don't need to bank your voice, you just need to register with your email on the website, and then you can download the app. Obviously it's free to download. It downloads onto Apple and Android devices. So it looks a bit like this when you get the app. So it's quite nice on this page because it's got symbols, so that's your favourites. It comes with some ready loaded phrases, so it's got favourites, entertainment, chat, emotions. So when you click into that one, it'll bring up your favourite phrases that you can customise. The problem with once you go past the home screen, it's obviously text, so it's literacy dependent. Again, I was thinking about ways around this. You could use the favourites button and just have a small number there, and if you were just using one key word that your child could recognise, then that would be a potential way of using it. Okay, so it's there, worth looking at. Again, all these things are all available just from your smartphones nowadays. And I've also just put in here that, as conscious of, I'm speaking to parents, you're all obviously very motivated, hence you are here. Just to say, we need you, we need campaigners. I've put up this example here. So this is this lady's Twitter handle. So she's a local parent from our area who has a child with a speech difficulty, and she has excelled herself. So these communication stations, so it's letters, numbers, symbols. So these are now in all the parks in our local area. Okay, they're in the local parks, they're in some of the shopping centres. She's all been on a mission. Okay, so that's why I'm just saying we need parents. I didn't put it on here, from a feeding point of view, there is it's a blog really, but there is a Facebook group, but it's a private group that you have to be invited to join. But if you went onto the blog, so it's called Tube to Chicken, if you search that blog, say another local campaigner of a parent whose child was nasogastric tube fed, and she fought tooth and nail to get funding for medium-term tube feeding, so under the umbrella, under supervision of psychology services, which was specialist commission services. She achieved that, she did that, and had a home-based tube-weaning programme, which took about 4 or 5 weeks, and got her son weaned off nasogastric tube feeds. He remains fully orally fed, but that's not to say he doesn't have ongoing challenges with feeding, but he has always remained fully orally fed since that point where she got the tube weaning programme in place. So, I think that's everything. So sorry to be such a quick whiz through.